whereas under old IBR, it would be $967 a month, over $300 a month more for an additional 5 years. And while we're on the subject of things that are potentially under attack by an incoming administration, let's go through all of them. So, what's safe versus what's under attack? If you're following along on audio, we have a slide up on the screen right now that shows you what's safe versus what's at risk. When it comes to the things that are safe, public service loan forgiveness is safe. Without getting too deep into the details, it would require a significant majority of the Senate to vote to do away with public service loan forgiveness. They've tried it in the past. It has failed miserably because the amount of majority they would need will require both moderate Republicans in swing states to join with them and also some Democrats, which is just not going to happen. So public service loan forgiveness is safe. Also, because the income-based repayment plans and the forgiveness offered under old IBR were created by Congress, it would require a similar majority. And that's also something that I don't see occurring. Them closing off the ability for you to have your student loans forgiven at all is not really a good political maneuver. So public service loan forgiveness and at least having two options for income-driven repayment that offer forgiveness are things that are safe. You also will see that, in my opinion, there is no scenario where the one-time adjustments to your credit under the PSLF waiver and the IDR waiver, I don't see a scenario where they can claw that back. It would require too much effort, too much coordination with loan servicers to find information that, in my opinion, would be impossible to find. So if you have either had your student loans forgiven already as a result of that waiver, I see no scenario where they claw back that forgiven debt. Or if you've gotten yourself significantly closer to forgiveness, I see no scenario where they can reasonably go back and find an amount of credit that they should kick you back to. So those plans are safe. Now, when it comes to what's at risk, public service loan forgiveness buybacks are, to me, definitely on the chopping block. As a reminder, public service loan forgiveness is something that requires 10 years worth of payments while working for an eligible government or nonprofit employer and paying your student loans back under income-driven repayment plans. And for various reasons, there are scenarios where you might have worked for an eligible employer, but you decided that you weren't going to pay your student loans during those years that would have counted had you paid. Public service loan forgiveness buyback program allows you, if you can prove that once you have those past credits that you didn't receive, you would be over the 10 years needed to have your student loans forgiven. It allows you to go back and calculate what you would have paid during those years and just pay it to the Department of Education now and have your student loans forgiven as a result under public service loan forgiveness. And this is not a program that I see being looked upon favorably by the Trump administration. That is projection, but in case I'm right, if you are eligible for public service loan forgiveness buybacks, which really just means that you had student loans while working for a nonprofit or a government employer for at least 10 years, then I would definitively go through the process of signing up now. In this email with the recap for the webinar, we're going to include resources for how you can go through studentaid.gov and submit a request for public service loan forgiveness buybacks. But that is something that I would do yesterday if I was eligible for public service loan forgiveness through this program. In terms of other things that are at risk, we've talked about the SAVE plan. I have an asterisk on the screen next to the Pay As You Earn plan and the Income Contingent Repayment plan, those being the other two plans that were created by the Department of Education, and also the Biden forgiveness programs. There's no need to even go to the details. If there was a major forgiveness program that was introduced during the Biden administration, that program is not going to happen. And some other considerations that you want to keep in mind are defaulted student loan payments. If you have a defaulted student loan, that is one of the worst financial circumstances that could occur. But during the pandemic and even stretching to now, most defaulted student loan borrowers have not had to make a payment towards their loans. They have not had to deal with garnished wages or garnished tax returns. In some states, they will even strip you of your professional licenses so that you can't work when you have a defaulted student loan. That is another area that the Trump administration has already said that they're upset with. So I would expect that student loan payments and wage garnishments and tax garnishments will likely resume in short order once the new administration comes back into power. Partial financial hardship is something that we're about to discuss literally on the very next slide. And then lastly, income recertifications. We talked about this briefly, but it's highly likely that if you're on Save, or even if you are on another income-driven repayment plan that you haven't changed since March of 2020 when payments paused under the pandemic, that you haven't had to recertify your income and your current payment is based off of income from 2018 or 2019. A reminder, even if it is the right thing for you to do long term, such as switching from Save to pay as you earn, you will have to recertify your income immediately if you switch plans. Versus if you stay under your current plan, let's say that it's not Save, what the Department of Education has said is that November of 2024 is the earliest that you would have to recertify, but the actual date is going to be based on your IDR plan anniversary. This is another concept that we've talked about on the podcast. But let's say that the anniversary of your IDR plans when you typically recalculate your payments is in July of each year. Well, because they won't ask anybody to recertify before November, that means that you essentially skated this year and you won't have to recertify your income until July of 2025. But if your IDR plan anniversary is typically in December, because that comes after November, but it's still in the same calendar year, then you will have to recertify your income in this calendar year. So that's another consideration when you're deciding to stay on a plan or switch a plan, but at least you would want to have some idea if you've had a significant increase from then to now of how much that increase will be and when it will occur. You can find that IDR plan anniversary by looking at your NSLDS data file. We'll put resources for how you can find that file in the body of this email as well. Or you can go to your loan servicer and ask them for that month. So for example, if your payment was going to go from $300 to $600 a month, I would definitively want to know when that would occur so I can plan accordingly. But let's go into this concept called partial financial hardship. We've talked about this in a recent episode of the podcast, but the easiest way to describe it is if you sign up for an IDR plan and when they calculate your payment, what you would pay based on your income is higher than what you would pay under a 10-year standard plan. You do not have a partial financial hardship. And that's important because a partial financial hardship is required under the pay-as-you-earn plan and the income-based repayment plan. Now, if you're already on one of these plans, you don't get kicked off because you have a partial financial hardship. What would occur is they would revert your payment to a 10-year standard payment, and they would still give you credit towards student loan forgiveness. That means that there's a scenario where it could still make sense to stay on that plan, even if you're making a 10-year standard payment, because if you're pursuing something like public service loan forgiveness and you're not having that same payment for the entire 10 years, you still could have a significant amount of student loans forgiven, even though in this calendar year, your payment is technically what would be needed to pay off a loan in full under the standard plan. If you're looking on screen, we have a quick scenario that we use from the calculator for our guide to income-driven repayment plans. We have a single person who makes $100,000 with a $75,000 student loan balance. You can see that under the pay-as-you-earn plan, in the new IBR plan, their payment would be $645 a month. But under the old IBR plan, it would be the exact same as the 10-year standard payment, which is $832 a month. That is because when they calculated the payment under old IBR, it was higher than the 10-year standard plan, meaning that this person did not have a partial financial hardship and their payment reverted to the 10-year standard plan option. So now, based on all that information, let's talk about some strategies for where you stand. If you have private student loans, this is where you come into play. If you are considering refinancing to a private lender, this is also where this information will be valuable. And as we discuss it, we're going to break you up into three camps. And you definitively, if you have federal student loans, you're a part of one of these three camps. You either have a federal or private student loan balance that is equal to or less than 1 times your household income. You have a student loan balance that is between 1 to 1.5 times your household income, or you have a student loan balance that is greater than 1.5 times your household income. Let's talk about some strategies for each of those three camps, starting with those who have a loan balance of less than 1 times your household income. And for this camp, the strategy, unless you have other pressing financial priorities, is to optimize the repayment of your federal or private student loans. I say that caveat because let's say that, the goal would be long-term to pay off your loans in full for the least amount of money over the smallest period of time, but you do have significant credit card debt, or you are trying to take care of building up your emergency savings. Well, in that strategy, it may still make sense to take advantage of an income driven repayment plan, even though it's not the best optimized strategy for your student loans long term, so that you can focus on those other priorities. But once student loans have gotten on equal footing of your other priorities, it is highly likely that you're not going to have your student loans forgiven if you owe less than what you make on a yearly basis. Because going back to that partial financial hardship, as you saw on the previous screen, it's highly likely that you wouldn't have a payment under an IDR plan that would leave any remaining balance after 20 or 25 years. As a matter of fact, you may not even make it to 10 or 11 years. So if that's the scenario, instead of leaning on IDR, you would instead want to optimize your repayment strategy by finding the best combination of low interest rate and flexible repayment period and payment. Notice that I didn't say to find the lowest interest rate and the fastest repayment period. I said to find the best combination of those factors. The difference is the lowest interest rate and lowest repayment period may lead to a high payment that does not fit with your other financial priorities. You can definitively find a low interest rate if you're going to sign up for some 5-year repayment period. But if you're paying $1,500 a month towards your student loans and you're not able to save, you're not able to address your retirement needs, you're not able to pay down other debts, that's not the best strategy for you. It may be a better strategy to find a higher interest rate over a longer repayment period with a lower payment, because that allows you to both pay it off while also addressing other areas. Now, I will say that when it comes to federal student loans, in most times they have lower rates than what you would find with private lenders. And they also have more options and more flexible payment strategies when it comes to the ability to defer or forbear or income driven repayment plans, standard plans, and the like. However, interest rates on federal student loans are actually pretty high right now. And there are scenarios in windows like this where you could potentially find a lower interest rate with a private lender. And if the goal is to optimize repayment, there could be a scenario where it makes more sense to refinance that federal loan with a private lender. Or you may just say, and some people are saying this, even if it doesn't make the most financial sense, I am tired of trying to keep up with all this information going on with federal student loans. I just want to have this stuff paid off with a lender that doesn't change the terms and doesn't change the rules. And as a result, I'm going to refinance. That's not a bad strategy if that's something that gives you more peace of mind. If you are pursuing private student loans, there are some things that you want to be aware of as compared to federal student loans that work in your favor. Private student loans, they base your interest rate and terms off of a number of factors. Things like the SOFR index, which is something that they use to determine interest rates on a quarterly basis, monthly basis in some cases. They look at the credit score that you bring to the table and also the dependability of your income. And they also look at things like your cosigner's finances, if you have a cosigner. And if you had a cosigner in the past and you're trying to get them off of your loan, and I highly encourage you to do so, because if you were the person who took out the loan for your schooling, the cosigner has an equal responsibility to pay off that debt, which is something that if you have the ability to release them of that obligation, I would definitely consider doing so. If you co-sign for someone else and you need to get off that loan as fast as possible, when they have improved finances,